I think this is working.
The mic should be on.
Can one of you guys watch comments to make sure that somebody is actually watching, that they can hear us? Can you watch the comments on the... Because I actually have a coworker watching this evening. She wanted to be here, but she couldn't. Okay. Hey, everyone. Hello. Thanks for waiting. Oh, I'm Kyle, one of the organizers with Nate and Xiaoxin and Ian. So you've got all 4 organizers here tonight, plus the original. So I've got a couple announcements first, and I think you guys have seen that. So All Things Open is coming up in October. Last year's conference was packed full of awesome speakers. This year's conference looks to be the same. The guys at All Things Open were nice enough to give us a 15% off discount, so use TJS15 if you want to go and get 15% off. That's probably a pretty good deal. I actually haven't looked at the price yet. Does anybody know what the... Let's register. Is it free? $99. There you go. Or $200. Or both days, $149. That's pretty good for a local conference. So. All right. Next thing, we have real-time collaboration with Lucas tonight, and then I just announced it yesterday, the Internet of Things with Burr Sutter from Red Hat. That should be a pretty interesting one. I think he's going to talk about MQTT, and he's going to have a whole bunch of devices, Raspberry Pi, and all these other little things that you work with a Raspberry Pi to get it all talking to each other. I'm not sure. I think it'll probably be similar to the presentation that he just did at the Red Hat Summit up in Boston. If you want to check that out, it's on YouTube. You can see him the demo from that keynote, and it's pretty cool. And that's going to be at MetLife. So I haven't actually been to MetLife yet, but we had a meetup there not too long ago, and I heard it's pretty nice, amazing. So we'll have a new building and future thinking presentation, so that should go well. And then also, so between now and when All Things Opens goes, I'll give out, we'll try to give away a free ticket to All Things Open tonight, and then another free ticket in August. So I've got 2 to give away. Or maybe I'll just take one for myself, which wouldn't be fair. But yeah, so that's kind of it for announcements. Does anybody have anything they want to share? Or
Question.
Sure.
Is there an internet password? Yeah.
For guests, yeah, we'll just pass that around. Any other questions, comments, cool things to talk about? Oh, yeah.
So hey, my name's Ian. I co-organize Triangle JavaScript, and I work for a company called Living Social, and we're hiring 20 developers in Q3. So we do a lot of Rails and JavaScript, Angular, good stuff like that. So if you're interested, come have a chat with me afterwards, and I'll get your resume posted to the hiring manager. Thanks.
Speaking of jobs, does anybody else have job openings that they'd like to share? Anybody looking for somebody at the top?
Hopefully you guys can hear me. I work for a company called K4 Connect. We're in downtown Raleigh. We're an Internet of Things home automation company, and we're hiring some JavaScript developers, test engineers, embedded systems developers, kind of a lot of different things. So if you're interested, come talk to me or go to k4connect.com.
Now I think somebody from, I can't remember who it was, they just recently posted an email to everybody about 2 Node positions that are open. Oh, it was NetApp. So NetApp is looking for 2 Node people if you're into that kind of thing. Anything else anybody want to share?
Hey, I'm Mark Regan. I'm the CEO of Employ Us. We don't have a job opening right now, but before the next meetup, we're putting a team together, converting them from their Ruby, Objective-C, Postgres, Java stack to a full JavaScript. So come down here if you're
And then also, thanks to Citrix for hosting us tonight. This is nice, all the pizza, and it's Lily's. If you haven't had Lily's pizza before, it's some of the best. And then Luke is the one responsible for all of the awesome Firebase swag that we got tonight. So please take some. That's not all the hot sauce, is it?
That's all the hot sauce.
All right, that's all the hot sauce. So everybody should be able to take one, right?
They have taken some in reserve.
All right, so definitely, yeah, grab some of the Firebase stuff, and if you don't have anything else.
I do have, if you're interested after this in using Firebase, I have a discount code that they sent me, but it's good for like a 3-month free of their, whatever the high-end thing is. If you're interested, let me know, and I can give that to you.
And Lucas just walked away as I was going to have him. Oh, one more.
I work for Cloud9 ID, and we're hiring as well. We make cloud-based integrated development.
I've used it. I'm sure you've used it too.
Yeah, some of you may have used that, but
You haven't used Cloud? No, I've used both, Cloud MV and Cloud9. So.
yeah, so we're looking for JavaScript engineers or DevOps or Ruby guys.
All right, cool. All right, Lucas, you're up.
All right.
Keep this thing too much.
Is it on here?
It's on you right now.
No, I mean, you want me to share, or are we good?
Yeah, go to the share thing on the left.
All right, hey everyone. Glad to be here. I'm Lucas Myers, for those of you who don't know me. Back in the Triangle for a extended visit, but this is the tail end of it. I was here for 3 weeks, working out of the share file office here, and then taking a little break down at the coast and a couple days back here. Great to be back in town and see everybody. We founded Triangle JavaScript, I think, in 2008 or something like that, so it's been going for a long time. And since I left 2 years ago, the group has been growing strong. Kyle, Ian, Shashin, and Nate have been doing a great job of keeping the group going, and just has grown. I think it's doubled in size since I left. So
Yeah,
it's like
1,400. It's almost 1,500 members.
yeah. So I mean, that's got a great community of developers here in Raleigh and Triangle area. So great to see everyone out. So we too here at Citrix are also hiring, just like everybody else. We have a careers page right here. Feel free to peruse to it if you're interested. I'm not sure there's a ton of stuff right here in the share file office right now. I know there's a couple of Ruby positions, and there may be a couple of front-end positions as well. But we are definitely hiring for our San Francisco offices and our Santa Barbara offices, which is where I'm located out of. We're looking for a lot of front-end engineers. So if you want to do front-end stuff and you want to live on the West Coast, feel free to take a look at what we've got available on here. And in addition to engineers for front-end stuff, there are some back-end positions, and we're really looking for a lot of designers too right now on the West Coast as well. So if you know anybody that's interested in design positions, they can come work for us if they'd like to. And there may be some stuff here in the building as well.
You have an extra bit.
Have an extra what?
Android?
Yeah, no. I do not. All right, so this is a little bit easier with a mouse, I think. We already talked about Triangle JavaScript, so let's go back. All right, so this is, I have 3 slides. Welcome to React is not a framework. I'm just kidding. I don't know if anybody's seen the rounds on the internet, but there's a lot of anti-React framework stuff. It really isn't a framework. It's great, but it's not really a framework. Anyway, we're here to talk about real-time collaboration with Firebase. And that's the end of my slides. So we're just going to do like looking at code for the rest of the night. Hopefully nobody gets too bored, and if it's too small, we'll try to blow it up a little bit. All right, so let's put this guy here. Three slides, that's all you get. All right, so Firebase. If you haven't heard of Firebase, it's a backend-as-a-service provider. And basically, if you just need a backend and that's what you want to build your own and spin it up, you can just get Firebase and use that. It's a real-time backend service, so as things are updated, it propagates back out. So it's bidirectional with the updates. And let me see if I can get one here with logging out first. Of course, then I'm going to have to log back in, and that's going to take forever. But we'll just take a look at it. So it's a powerful platform for your mobile or web application. It says they offer mobile offline support. Everything is kind of JSON and based. REST APIs, it's really well documented. I know that there's a lot of other products out there that are just kind of like crappily documented, like Angular, but Firebase is pretty well documented. It's pretty easy to use. I haven't looked at like the community too much yet, but I've chatted with a few of them on Twitter, and they're very receptive to having a conversation. So, really good group of people. And they also do have some like libraries that interact with Angular. We're going to look at those tonight as well. So, if you're already using Angular, this might be a good solution for you if you just need to spin up a quick backend for something. I have no idea what the pricing is like. I'm using the free tier just for fun. So we'll take a look. So you get a free hacker plan for 50 connections, 5 gig, and then if you're going to use it, that's what they charge you for it. But Luke said he can get you half off.
Oh, yeah, it's off the candle.
Candle one. Okay. So, all right. Yeah. All right. Now I got to remember what my password is for this one. Hold on a second. Sorry, I don't have my password manager on this browser. It's going to take me a second. Has anybody used Firebase before here besides Luke? So a lot of people have. Good. So what are your opinions on it so far while I'm trying to find my login here? Expensive, yeah. Awesome, but expensive, yeah. All right. All right. So once you sign up for an account, you can go into your developer account and you can take a look at what you have for apps, which will be nothing, but you can go in and create one. So they conveniently call your first app my first app. Woohoo! I've created a couple other ones. One is a project I did at work, which is kind of where we based this off from. It was a hack notes editor thing. And so my Fire Notes project is here. If you want to create a new one, you can just go over and start typing stuff in and call it whatever. And that one is not available, so we'll just come up with something else, and that's clever enough. And if you don't pick up your own name, it was just automatically giving you like fire or flaming or fiery something and just some combination of things. So anyway, we've created a whatever backend. So now we've got a backend we can hook up a front end to if we really want to. And we'll just take a look at it for a second by doing the manage app here. If you've already done Firebase stuff and it's boring, I apologize. So you can see there's nothing here. It's null. And it's all JSON now. So if I wanted to add something to this, I can add a child to that, and I can call it true, and I can give it a value of var. Right? So there you go. It's just easy JSON stuff, right? So if you're already working with it as your transport or in your apps and stuff like that, it's all set. It's ready to go. And the cool thing is, too, if it will work here, let's see, you can actually navigate to this stuff. And it'll tell you what it is, so you can drill down into these things. And when you're making your database calls, you actually can point directly to these instances, so you can drill down into children as you're making database calls, and it makes it actually really useful. And we'll take a look at some of those things in a little bit here. All right, so let's go over to here. I put all this stuff up on GitHub. You are free to download and do whatever you want with it. But I want to go over to first to make sure I'm at my initial commit. So we have a very basic project right now. You can ignore that I have Bower components because they're in there because they're ignored, and the node modules as well. But I've created a basic project that we can build out, an app that we can interact with each other on. So I've got a real basic README. Yeah, here's what we want to do, and I've created a configuration folder that's not tracked either. I did this out of convenience for doing this project, and in real life you'll probably have you may or may not use a config file when you're setting up your stuff, but for me I wanted to do this so that I can save my database name here and not actually include it in my Git repository because I don't want anybody hammering it. Not that it really matters, so you can include that. Or you can set up whatever other build process you use to populate that in there. But for the sake of doing this presentation, I'm just including this in here. All right, so let's go ahead and switch over to our initial project setup. Check this out. Source tree is yelling at me about things. So I actually find changelogs are pretty handy. I don't know if anybody reads the diffs in these things are usually pretty nice for seeing what's going on with the changes and stuff like that. And we can jump back over to the editor. Is this visible enough in the back, or do you want me to blow this up a little bit? It's okay? All right. So you can see we've got a package.json set up here. So I've got a Node server running on this. You don't need to have Node for this. The only reason I have Node on here is so we can have a quick Express server so that we can just run this in the browser. We've got a quick server here, and like I said, I'm just pulling in stuff from Bower components. It's all static stuff, and app directory, and then the config file gets added in later. So real basic setup. If we switch back over to Atom here, we can see we've got our dot files and all that other crap that you need for setting up a project. All right, so nothing that looks like an application yet of any sort. So let's just see what we have next here. My mouse button is broken, so it's misbehaving on me. All right, really basic app. We've got an index file, a JavaScript file with nothing in it, and the same thing with the CSS file. So very basic, bare bones start. Really care about that. Add Bower to it and do some more Bower components. We want to make sure we include Firebase. We want to include Firebase in the app, so just a simple script tag to call it in. And here's where I added in the config file so that I'm including the config file to pull my database name from that. And now we're going to do something that adds a very simple note. So let's check that one out real quick here. All right, so if we go back over to the browser, should have an Express server running if we're lucky. On port, no, maybe not. Details because, oh, I didn't start the server. That's embarrassing. Okay, so now we've got a server running, hopefully. Okay, yay, we've got a foo notes. And as you can see right here, all we have is a content editable div. I can type whatever I want in here, and there's a little note. So that looks pretty cool, but it doesn't really look like it's doing anything. So let's switch back over to our dashboard in Firebase, and we'll take a look at this guy up here and see if we have anything in here or not. Let's trash this one. You guys can see that one later. So this database was already set up. I was using this for testing this out, so there's some stuff that's already in here for the sake of it being in here. But I think this is maybe the note, maybe not. Yep, so this is it right here. So we've got this node called, this is the foo node. And let's move this down here out of the way for a second. Switch back over to this one. Now I'm going to go into this editor here and should get a change, maybe not. Oh no, it's not going to work that way. All right, so let's try this. And to pick that stuff up. So, see, I didn't have to do any setup to make this work on the back end. So let's actually take a look at the code to do that, what we actually did for that. App.js is here. So what are we going to do? We need to declare what we want Firebase to do, what database to use. So you can see I've got Firebase pointing towards my config folder. So this is basically, I'm just naming what database I want to use. I'm creating a reference to that with the Firebase call here. So that just basically sets up your Firebase constructor and you're all set to go. And now you can start creating references to things within there. So remember we talked about it's like JSON, so you can create child nodes and stuff like that. So on our parent node, we're going to create one called notes. And if we go back over to this one here, so you see we have a child here of our database called notes. And if we wanted to drill down even farther than that, we can drill down into each of these children. You can do whatever you want with these things. It's just JSON. That's all it is. Okay, so we have a reference to that note in that JSON structure that is automatically wired up. Now all we have to do is pick our element that we want to mess with. So I've picked an element, I made a query selector towards a little element on there, the note content class, which would be this guy here. I know this is kind of low level, maybe a little bit boring, but we'll try to get through it and maybe take a look at something a little more interesting. Here's our content editable. Here's our stuff inside there. And I've got an event listener on here. And basically what we're doing is when the note changes, I'm just logging that it's changed. So I really see it because this isn't right. So on the side. Let's put it back at the bottom. Oh. All right. So the note changed, and it tells me what it changed to. Let me go back over to here. So it's logging that it changed. It's grabbing the content and then getting the name on that attribute. So it's assigning our note a name inside the database, and then it's doing this update note function, passing in a name and the content every time we change it. And all that's really doing is it's running a function called note.update, which is a reference to Firebase. And this is a Firebase method inside here on the update. And that's just basically telling Firebase, hey, go out and find this piece of content in this child and update it. So there's 3 different methods that you can use to do your updates and stuff like that. So update is usually pretty safe if you have stuff in there that you don't want to clobber. So like you literally are changing some content, but you don't want to overwrite the entire thing. There's another one called set, which will wipe everything out. So if you have anything in there, it'll overwrite the entire thing. And then there's another one that is really useful called transaction. And this is a really good one when you're doing collaborative stuff, because what it does is it sets it up as a transaction, and it'll wait its turn, basically. Firebase will automatically wait its turn until it knows it's safe to do the overwrite. And supposedly it handles all the merging and all the conflict stuff just automatically. I haven't had a chance to mess with it enough to make it break and see what happens when it breaks, but generally for anything collaborative, you're going to want to use a transaction. So something really simple, all right? That's great. So let's move on to something else here. So we were on this one. We added a simple note. So we decided here that transaction is a good idea, so I've changed that one to be transaction. So that if you have multiple people doing things at once, like we just said, you don't get the typewriter key syndrome. All right, so what else do we need? That's great that there's notes, but we need to have users. So it would be a good idea if we start creating some users somehow. So let's just see if we can take a look at this one. Okay. So again, we've got our project here. Let's go to app and see what we've got in here now. So we've got some of the same stuff that we had before. We've got a reference to the Firebase database we want to use, creating an object on it. And then this time we're going to reference the child users. So if we go back over to that, it's right here. Users, you can see we have our users child right here. And I'm in here, yay, with my email address. That's great. Okay. So if we go back over to our server here, let's take a look at what we're doing now. We've got this little note here that's got our foo note in it, and doesn't like that our stuff is not defined because we were trying to play with this stuff. So let's just see if we can actually register anybody or not. So let's do sample.com. And it says, register button, successfully created user account with a simple login 5. So it looks like it actually registered a user for us, so let's go over here and do it again. Let's take a look. Go back up here. That's not it, and that's not it, and that's not it. And it didn't work. So let's just see if we have it actually wired up all the way. There's a lot of errors in this. So our register function down here should be registering it. Creating user. No? It insists that it did it. That's awesome. All right, so obviously something is a little wonky here, but we would be able to create our users there. So we'll move on. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so it says it's creating it against something. I don't know if it's just pointing to the other database right now or not. But it should be in this one. There is the config. Fire notes. Fire notes. All right, well, we will just move on because I'm not exactly sure what's going on. I don't want to live code to fix this, but we will just move on. So let's just look at some of the files and see what we changed there. It's a fire bug, yes. The Firebase bug. All right, so I mean, we created a login form, and we created this note class down here. What else did we do? We made a bunch of changes in here. So we referenced users instead of notes. And we added all these form elements in here to watch, get the values from, and then created a register user function. And we called this create user. Again, this is Firebase stuff here. Create user is built into that, so that would normally work. It says it's working, it's returning success, so beats me. All right, so anyway, as you can see in the code here, this is just a hot mess anyway, so I'm just going to trash this and we're just going to move on into Angular and use that instead. Because most of the time, you're not going to write this stuff from scratch anyway, right? You're going to try to use a library if there's one available, and let's move on here. So create some basic Angular stuff. Let's get a basic Angular setup. All right, so now we have something that looks a little bit better because we threw some Bootstrap on it to make it a little bit easier to look at. And this is kind of like that form we were just looking at, right? So we've got a login registration form. So let's try registering again. So let's do var at is.com 23 for the password and try registering. Okay. So we didn't get any messages back, so I might not have anything on the console, but it did something. So let's just go see if we got anything that time. This would be really embarrassing if nothing shows up here. Look at that. Nothing's showing up. So what's that? No, it shouldn't be. This login and auth section actually should have looked at this a little bit ago, but they allow you to specify what kind of auth you want to use. With Firebase, it's built into it, so we're trying to use the email and password authentication, but you can also enable like Facebook, Twitter, GitHub, and other OAuth stuff. So if you want to use those other services to log in, you can use those as well. So great. So the demo is not working, which is totally awesome again, but we'll take a look at some code here and just see what we got. Okay. So we've got a page here, and we'll try using one of the ones that I know is in there. We'll see if we can actually log in or not. And the answer is no. Wow, this is terrible. I am so embarrassed. All right, anyway.
Looks like it posted, it put everything, it didn't run the JavaScript or the Angular. All that stuff.
Did it? Yeah, it did. Yeah. It's a secret. It's a secret. All right. Okay. So obviously there's something broken here too, and that always happens when you do these things live. Okay. So what we were trying to do here, let's take a look. Okay. So we wanted an Angular application, right? So let's just see if we have everything we need for that. Angular. Is Angular in here anywhere? Angular is right here. Yes. Let's see which one we checked out here. Okay, so
One of their databases.
is it?
Under staff,
Oh, maybe that's what's going on. Well, that would be pretty awesome. So we'll pretend that their database is up and that things are actually working they're supposed to be. Because these were working earlier when I was going through the practice on it. So we'll just take a look at some code over here. We've got an Angular app right here. We've got a view set up on this Notes app. We are including Angular, Angular route, and calling in our app later on, and including some of our Angular stuff down here. We've got a navbar component, and we've got a main view. So let's go take a look at those pieces really quick here. So in our main view here, we've got an empty controller, nothing in it. We've got a login form right here, and this is probably why nothing is happening, because our controller has nothing in it. So maybe that's what we need to put some changes on that. See, we've got a form, action equals this. Yeah, so there's nothing going on here. There's no Angular on this stuff right here. So we have a basic setup, but we don't actually have an application yet on this one. Same thing with our navbar controller. It's empty, so we need some stuff in there as well. And here is our navbar here, and you can see we have the controller assigned to it and some other little pieces, some shows on these things based on whether or not you're authenticated or not. So there's a good explanation for why this is not working. So let's go see if we can make this work. All right. Yep. So let's take a look at the next one here. Hopefully this has everything we need. Because all the controllers were undefined. There was no ng submit, nothing else on it. It looked like it should have done something, but it was obviously not, and nothing was coded on it that needed to be. So let's go take a look at the code first this time. All right, so close some of these out here for a second. Okay. So here's our index again. So we've got our application here. Great. That's awesome. Here is our nav bar. We have our controller on that. That's good. We've got our stuff on here. This is pretty much the same as it was before. Nothing really is a whole lot different. Angular and all the other pieces that we need. Firebase, our config file. So let's go take a look at our main controller. Hopefully there's something in there, and there is. Okay, so we've got a main controller in here. And we're calling in an auth service. So we've written an auth service here so we can kind of abstract some of this Firebase stuff out, and we can use it for logging in and out. So some of the things we need to do, we need an email and a password for doing the email and password validate or authentication. So we're going to have those on our scope coming from the form. So if we look at the form, hopefully it is on the form somewhere. So here we go. Here's our models on the email and the password. So those are pretty handy to have. So we should have models now for those. We want to be able to tell if a user is logged in or not. So we've got this scope.auth equals an auth object thing. So basically what we're doing, we'll take a look at the service here in just a second, but we're exposing a couple of different things. There's some methods that we've written inside the service we'll take a look at that allow us to do things like log in and log out. We're also directly exposing this auth object from Firebase. So we can do this checking like this easily inside here. It's just a convenience thing. There's probably better ways to do it, but if you want it just quick and dirty, this will be good enough to get it done. So as you log in and off, this thing will automatically update. So your scope, will pick this up, and then your markup will pick that up as well. So for example, with what was it, the nav bar was checking for that. That was in index. So if there is auth data, it wants to show you that you can log out, and if there's not auth data, then it wants to prompt you to log in. So let's go ahead and we'll jump over to this service and we'll go back and forth. So we've got an Angular service over here called auth. We've got an auth factory we're setting up here. We're referencing our Firebase again. So we've got our Firebase up here. Here's the auth object that we're setting up here and creating a ref with the Firebase auth ref. So this basically wraps the authentication method. So now we've got an object here that we can use to write our methods against. And this is, again, like I said, we can pass this directly back out, expose it, so we have a convenience for checking whether or not somebody is actually logged in. All right, so it might be nice for us to save some information about a user when we log them in or store them. Had this actually worked the first time. Let's see if there's anything in there. What you would have gotten was essentially these simple logins, email address, and the provider. And that's basically all it stores. But if you want to store other data, which usually you want to do, you want to store other data for your users, like their Twitter handle or name or something like that, you can set up a way to do that in here. So we're saving some profile data. And basically, we're doing an update and passing in the following stuff that we're getting from our users. So, well, one thing you could do is you could collect more information on the form. You can pass that stuff through to your call to this. The other thing is that we're doing here is for getting the name, we're just automatically going through and just depending on what method you use to sign up or sign in. If you use a password, then we're just going to go and find whatever's before the @ symbol on your email address. If you're Twitter, then it's going to grab your Twitter display name. If it's Facebook, it'll grab your Facebook display name. So you can kind of just cheat and grab a name that you can use real easily. If you want to be more interactive with your users, you can do whatever you want. You can pass that stuff in instead of doing it inside here. And here's where we're declaring what we actually want to expose down here. So we've got this object that we're creating, and we're going to return the object down here. This is the stuff that's inside it. So like I said, we're exposing that auth object, which again, it's just a wrapper on all the authentication methods. We've got a register function, a login function, and a logout function. This one's the longest of the three. So basically what this one does, we are taking in the user's information and trying to create the user with this create user method that's on the auth objects. When we get the promise back from that, we have the data that it returns. We want to log the user in. So when the user gets logged in, then we will go ahead and grab that auth data from that. We will run the save profile here. So we run this, returns the auth data from that, and then we go down here and we finish up, and we can pass that back to the controller so that it knows you're done. And then the same thing with your login and your logout down here. Just again, you're calling stuff that's on the authentication object. Nothing too difficult to understand there, hopefully. So let's actually try seeing if it works this time. So let's do js@js.com JavaScript and hit register. Okay, so it did something. The screen disappeared. So I think what I had set this up to do was to check the auth data, and let's see if that's the case. So ng show, no auth data. So if we have auth data, if the user is logged in, then in theory, this would disappear, which is what we just saw. And it says sign in instead of sign out. A little bit suspicious, so let's just take a look and see if we got anything over here. I have no idea. Again, we're going to just pretend that it's on that database, which is really a bummer. So we'll move on to the next piece then. So that's great that we have users now, but usually you're going to want to do something after you get a user, then just keep on that view. So if we're doing a note-taking app, basically what we want to do is you want to get them into writing a note or seeing a list of their notes or something like that. So for the sake of this, let's take a look at what we did here. We made some stubs for notes. So look at our Angular app down here. We've got some routes in here now. We've got a note route and a notes route. We've got controllers and templates for them. So let's just take a look at those guys real quick. There should be nothing in there. It's empty controller, empty controller. Still have our auth service. Hasn't really changed. We can actually go over here and see if we've changed anything else. So we added a note in the routes. Those main, got our comments from the previous step. Leave it up there. And we want to show notes. We want to show notes. And we want to show notes. Okay, so let's just jump ahead to this. All right, so we've obviously got more stuff now, so let's close some of these things to make it a little easier to look at. And let's go over here and see if maybe we can actually do anything or not. So apparently we're logged in. So that login action apparently where the registration worked. That's good to know. So what did we change in this? So between that and the last time, what did we do? We added the routes and the links to the routes. Have we looked at this one? We added a notes service. That might be useful to look at. Made a couple updates to main so that we could handle our routes. And we made some updates to the note controller here. So let's go take a look and see what kind of service we created for the notes here. So again, we want to access the notes in Firebase. So this time, instead of directly accessing the root node in your Firebase app, we want to get down into notes, which are obviously not in here right now. All right, so let's just go back over to here. If where you save a note, then in theory you should save the note. So we're going to do something to make things convenient for people to make people be able to more easily share these notes. So we're going to set up a 3-word string in the URL that's just going to be 3 random words, and let's hope that it actually works when we get to that point. And it'll be easy for people to like share that out with somebody if you want to share your note out with somebody. You could, grab a unique ID if you wanted to do it, and this doesn't do any checking against the backend to see if this node already exists. Obviously, if you want to do something like this, you would probably need to be doing that checking Firebase to make sure you don't already have that node in existence, so you don't collaborate. Is there what's that? Yes. So users get unique IDs, and I think you get unique ones for your objects too. And one other thing that we didn't look at yet, which would be the thing that I actually didn't put in here, is the so one of the settings, security and rules. So right now, I don't have any security or rules on this. This is wide open. Anybody can just get into this and just look at this and access it. If you were doing this on a real application, stuff like this, you would go in here, you would write rules on this so that you could restrict access so that you would not be able to access a node unless you were somehow associated with it. And I think you can use the user ID on that, and you can do checks against the stuff that's in your notes and stuff like that in your Firebase instance. I haven't messed with this a whole lot yet other than just to see that it's actually there, but it's supposedly pretty straightforward. Again, like everything else in Firebase, is pretty well documented, so it's definitely worth checking out if you actually want to make sure that you can restrict access. So we don't really get to like the authorization step. We get to authentication just to get people in and start doing stuff, but the authorization stuff is very important as well. Okay. So we've got a function here that's just going to generate a random note name. We've got a return Firebase array reference here. This is another little thing that's built into Firebase. It has all these methods that basically gives you an array of the reference that you're asking for. So if we were looking for a list of notes, our notes would be an array in there. This would basically send that back out in note format. It also has this one up here, Firebase object, so you can return an actual object back. So depending on what kind of data you need to get back from your Firebase, you can pick and choose these things. So in this service right here, this notes object, this is what we would use to grab out an individual note. So we want to look up a note, give details on it, let somebody work on it. We would do this. If we want to show a user a list of their notes, we would go through the get notes method down here, which basically wraps that Firebase array and just basically goes out. This one will grab a list of all of them. Again, ideally, you would go out and just pick out that users, and you can do that by, I think there's a filter system that you can use on the end of these that allows you to filter down what you're actually getting back in your calls. So let me just take a look at this here. That made some changes to what else? Notes. Okay. So you can see right here we made a change in here in the note route that should, if we visit that, check to see if you've passed any route parameters into it. If you haven't, then it's going to open up, it's going to call the note service and get a name from it and then redirect it back to this with that name. So let's just see if that does anything. It should. Okay. So basically all it did right there was it just went through that random thing, and now we have a boisterous Caribou Wanderers note that would be really easy for you to copy and paste or just tell your friend, hey, go check out my boisterous Caribou Wanderers notes, as long as they can spell boisterous and caribou. And then, you have a collaborative note you can work on. And I don't know if we have this wired up, but we do. So this new note is basically doing the same thing. It's got a function in the back on the controller that should be doing pretty much the same thing, directing you back to note. The note is generating a new note name. None of these are being generated in the database right now because either it's not working or it's just not wired up. I don't think it's wired up at the moment. So if we look at the main controller here, yeah, it's not really doing anything. It's just going to the route. All right, so let's actually go out and check out this next one here. See where we're at. Oh, you know what? We may have actually had that one. Take a look and see. Obviously no note here, but maybe if we got lucky, it actually... Let's just look at this one for fun. There's probably nothing in it, but... Yeah, there's no notes in this. All right, so we're going to take our whatever app, and we are going to see if we can get this one to behave for us. And go over and just swap this out and just see if this one is working. All right, so we've got an error now here. It says what? Oh, lots of errors. Okay, so let me make sure that we actually have that right. Trailing slash. Somebody's got eagle eyes. Yep. Okay. Barf. Look at that. That's terrible. That is just so not awesome. Okay. Well, whatever is not working, apparently. All right, well, we'll just go back to this one. All right, so wow, nice. Okay. My notes does nothing except goes to the route. So our Angular stuff seems to be doing what it's supposed to be doing. Let's see if we can log out. Yes, we can log out. And we log in. We need to go to, and we'll try logging in again. Okay, so it's letting us log in, which is good. And let's see if we're getting anything that's worth looking at. There it is. Look at that, we are getting auth data back, so I don't really understand what's going on here. So this stuff is coming back from Firebase. You can see we've got our user ID, our password, or the type of provider, the email address. So it's weird. Okay. What we'll do is we're just going to jump ahead to this one here, which I think is our last set of changes. Okay, so obviously we've got user auth apparently working but not showing up, which is confusing and not very helpful for you guys to see. But the auth data is coming back. You can see in the console that we are getting auth data back from that. Let's see if we can actually get some notes to work, and then maybe that'll help if we can get a note to actually work. Okay, so let's log out again. And should be taken to our list of notes, which we are. Did I not check this out? I probably did not refresh this. All right. So instead of us creating our own content editable stuff and making our own code editor, there are some tools. What I've used here is basically FirePad. And Firepad is a Firebase wrapper for one of two editors, CodeMirror, and I can't remember the name of the other one, but you can pick whichever one you want. So let's just go back over and take a look at some code and see what we've got here. So what we're including now, we already had Firebase before. We have to have Firebase. So we're including CodeMirror and Firepad so that we have the functionality of that built-in editor, and we don't have to create our own editor. I mean, if you want to write your own content editable and you want to do all that stuff, or if you want to do something that looks like a code editor, knock yourself out. But it's really convenient to use this. If you go to the Firepad site, they've got a lot of really nice examples of some Firepad setup that people have made that you can use for like markdown editors that are collaborative, and some other examples too. And maybe I'll pull it up in a minute. So we've got Angular, we've got Angularfire, which again is our binding wrapper for Angular to Firebase, which we've been using to do those wrapping. We've got Angular route. We've got our services that we looked at. We've got the navbar. We've got our views. We've got 2 filters that we've added, and we'll take a look at those in a second too. So first of all, let's go take a look at this and see if there's anything important in here. We're basically just including all our controllers and services and filters, which is nice. We've got our routes in here. So before we had this note route and we had this notes route, but because we had those characters, those words, we want to make sure that we can handle those as well. So it points to the same controller. So if we go into our note controller, so we've got a wrapper around, whether or not there are params passed in. If there are no params passed in, it's going to generate a new note, and it'll redirect you back out. Otherwise, it will go through and do what you want the controller to actually do. If you wanted to do a different way of doing this, would be like a different route to go to first that generates you and then sends you over to here, or you could call the note service into your other controllers and generate it there and then send it out. There's a number of different ways to do these things. So this note one is actually quite a bit of stuff going on in here. So we've got a data element here that we're saving, where we have set up. We've got the item set up here, and this is our route params item. So if we go over here and hit, this is our item right here, Steady Panda waveform. It's another awesome one. Right, so that should be in here in our item. We have a placeholder called my super awesome fire note, which should be showing up here, and if I click on this, we should be able to change the name of our note to JavaScript is great. And we've got our note down here, triangle JavaScript. And React is not a frame. Right. So we've got all these things going on inside here. So the nice thing about Firepad is it handles all the transactional stuff for you. And it basically saves each change atomically and then decodes those things as you're putting them in. And it's really nice and really is a really good convenient way for if you're doing collaborative stuff. It's really just kind of baked into it. So if you want to do collaborative editing without having to do your own stuff, that's great. Some of you may have seen this article recently on David Walsh's blog. It was actually Alden Daniels that wrote it. And he basically wanted to write his own collaborative editor, right? And ran into some problems with like collisions and stuff like that where you're offline or somebody else is saving changes and you didn't get their updates and stuff like that. So if you're interested in how to manage that stuff, this talks about operational transformation. It goes through about like concurrency control and some other things about how you can actually write that kind of stuff yourself. Yes?
I'm just wondering whether the industry is addressing the problem with JavaScript having these hot editors in on the client space, and the user doesn't know that the back end isn't fully functional or taking transactions. What will happen is the hot editor will just lock,
right,
and the screen will freeze, and your web browser will start eating those characters and control sequences and all sorts of bad stuff. It happens with Twitter all the time.
Yeah.
And the question is, how is the industry and JavaScript, and especially Firebase, addressing that?
I don't know that there's like an industry answer for it, other than test your stuff and follow best practices and code for problems and write tests to make sure that you're handling failures gracefully as possible. I mean, obviously, if something's not working, you're not connecting. If you have some type of long pole or something to fall back on, or if you can detect that your network connection has dropped somehow, it'd be nice. And the other thing too is the whole offline model.
I was going to say, that's what you really want is to go offline for at least a period of time, eat as many characters as you will give you, then from time to time go back online and see if you can force the data up.
Yeah, there's been a lot of stuff coming out of Google lately about talking about how to build offline web apps so that when you do log back on, you can go back online. So like last year at the Chrome Dev Summit, Jake Archibald demoed a app that was basically, it was a train app, right? So he gets on and off the tube all the time, and he wants to have this app he goes on, but the radio spins up and down every time you go through one station to the next, so you think you have a connection, your phone thinks you have a connection, but you don't. But you want to be able to gracefully pick up when you do have a real signal. So you want your web app to be able to handle that offline condition. And then when it gets the signal back in, gracefully handle that. I don't know all the underlying mechanisms off the top of my head, but it's definitely something worth like Googling, just finding like offline web app stuff in the past year or so.
So CouchDB is a client-side player for CouchDB, and the guys there, regardless if you're using CouchDB or not, have some posts about dealing with offline issues. And I think that in Firebase or Parse was not. Okay. I think it was Parse and Epic.
Firebase has a built-in. It will pull everything down, so it should work offline when it happens. So
it's quite likely it just goes into local storage or something until it knows that it can connect. But I don't know. Twitter could take a lesson from that, maybe.
Well, and I'm not jumping on Twitter, but it's every hot edit device on the client space that you see can get gummed up with the back end, or just your browser gets tired, for caching too much stuff. It happens all the time to me.
Yeah, I would definitely say look at some of the stuff that Google's been working on because they've been really pushing the offline web app stuff and bringing web apps, native web apps into Android and stuff like that. So they've really been pushing hard against like writing native apps and writing just web apps that look like native, factoring in stuff like that with offline that just kind of bites the dust and stuff like that. So yeah, and other services like Nate was saying, CouchDB and Firebase should handle that stuff gracefully. But I'm sure there's going to be plenty of editors that are out there that are just going to continue to be like that. And if you have an editor, it's not necessarily going to be coupled to that kind of service on the back end as well, right? So you could have a code mirror editor that's not hooked up to a nice service like this. So.
Another point about that, removal, if you are going to offline and pull waking up the cell radio, which is actually more expensive than reusing the cell radio. You need to think about strategy for that.
Right.
If you go offline, acceptably offline for a while, extended period. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree with you that you should wait your time and just let it happen later. And for the backend-as-a-service platforms that are like trying to handle offline stuff, it would really make sense for them to just handle that stuff through operational transformation or whatever approach they need to handle those conflicts later on, because you can be out of sync for probably a while in most cases before you really need to worry about I have all these merge conflicts going on. So if you're spinning the radio up every 20 seconds, that's really just a waste. I mean, there's not going to be that many people concurrently editing something that you're going to need to go in there and fix that.
What they're trying to do typically is in their editor add feature functions like Twitter, @ Twitter user accounts and what have you, instead of hitting the tweet button at the bottom, which causes action, you're a hot action while you're typing. And that's the problem. There really should be a parse button, but they don't want to do that. They want to make it transparent.
Yeah. It's an interesting problem.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll take another look at this node controller again and see what else we've got here. So our title texts, we're just basically swapping out whether or not we've got a data title or a placeholder. And we'll end up using that later on. So our edit title function down here, which this is basically when you switch back and forth through editing, goes along with the blur title here. Then we have our Firebase set up to connect to Firebase down here. So let's see, we're connecting to the auth stuff. And we've got a bunch of stuff going on down here. And this is a little bit more than we had before. And if we're lucky enough to see this thing work, it'll be a good illustration of why all this stuff is here. If not, then I would encourage you just to download it at your own time and see if it'll actually work. The developer thing for Firebase is free to just play around with, but it's kind of interesting to check out. So there's a lot of this setup stuff for the Firepad thing going on in here. So we've got the container that we're using. If we go into Note, it's right here. So this Firepad container. That's where we want that editor to show up at. All right, so we need to create a Firebase reference for that. Now you could potentially just abstract this stuff out into a service if you wanted to. And again, right here, so we're hitting our database. We're going into Notes. And then we're going to that specific note that we want. So again, we're going down nodes further down into our JSON structure and our database, and pointing down to that specific node that we want to impact. Then we do our code mirror, which is starting the code mirror code up here. And again, this is coming from that code mirror script. And Firepad, we're going to fire Firepad and tell it we're using it from code mirror. It also has another method to tell it whether you're using the other editor that it supports, which I can't remember what it is. And then a string of options you can pass into it. So you can turn off the rich text shortcuts and the toolbar and stuff like that. So I left them on just for fun. You can turn these off, and you can just you can hard code it to whatever font you want to support. It's kind of cool because you can do these, edits and things like that. It's your typical WYSIWYG text editor, right? Now, here's the next thing we're going to look at here. We're going to actually create another reference here with this Firebase objects. Okay, so we want to get that actual object that's in our Firebase database because we want to do three-way data binding on that. So if you're already familiar with Angular, hopefully. If you don't, it's just basically your data can flow both directions. So like we saw in the form field, you have a model in your view. You can put something in there and it flows back in. You can throw stuff from your backend model back out. So basically, Firebase calls this three-way binding, basically binding from your views back and forth. It's two-way binding, plus it's also two-way binding back to Firebase. So they call it three-way binding. So that anytime you update any of those spots, it's going to update the other ones as well. So if I go in and directly into my model inside here and change it, then it's automatically going to show up in the view, and it's automatically going to go back to Firebase. If I go to Firebase and update it there, it's going to update, it's going to propagate down the chain. And the cool thing is, and this is where you get your collaboration from, is that if somebody else is on that same node at the same time, if you make an edit on that, it propagates out to Firebase, and propagates back out to anybody else that's connected to that. So you could have 5 people collaborating on this node. If you make a change to it, it's just going to show up on those other clients, and vice versa. So you can all kind of type together and add stuff at the same time. And if it works, we'll see if somebody else can connect, and we can try to do some collaborative editing, but not sure if it's going to work or not. We'll see what happens. And then a couple of convenience things that I've added to this down here a little bit. Let's see what we got here. So there's our data binding. Is that when Firepad is ready, I've got a thing here to watch when Firepad is ready. And the reason we're doing that is we want to get the raw text of the note. And we're going to take that and we're going to assign that into our data up here. And we're doing that because, like I said before, when these notes are stored, if I go back over here with Firepad, let's take a look at, hey, we've got a note here. That's the one we just created. So this is awesome because now look at this. I've got this text right here, and I've got this title. But this stuff is not coming from Firepad. This is additional data that we're storing in that data on scope. And this is a convenience thing for us, and we'll take a look at this why in a second. But the way that Firepad stores these things, you've got this long chain of history right here. This is every edit that's ever been done, and this is very atomic. So if I drill down into any one of these things, it tells me who made the change. It's got a little hash or something here going on, and it's got some details about it. So this is the character that was changed. There was a letter C in position 22. Okay? So if you were to try to go back through and read this yourself, good luck. Right? If you wanted to parse out what everything was, you would have to go through this entire chain of things and parse this out yourself, because it's not exposed from Firepad if you go and grab that. Or if it is, I haven't bothered to mess around and look and see what it is, but I don't think that that piece of Firepad is exposed to you as a convenience method that you can use elsewhere in your code. So if you want to have it so that you can have the current state of your node handy, you can bind it to an object like we just did. We've got the 3 data binding on it, so that as you make a change, you get the current text string in that, and you can save that in here, and then you can use that however you need to. And the same thing with the note title as well. We want to save that in there. That's not saved by Firepad. That's not part of Firepad. So in order to save that on the note, we need to have that somewhere as well. So let's see here.
So in the history, you could play back and edit.
In theory, yeah.
Did someone do that with Google Docs, where they found a way to play back and edit a session with their Google Docs?
They probably did. It's probably something similar as well, because Google Docs is, again, another example of a collaborative editing tool, right? You have multiple users can go on there and do stuff at the same time, so it has to keep a history of what's going on. So these 2 things right here, the synced and stuff like that, is basically every time we get an update, it's going to get the raw text and set it into the Firepad ref. So right here, that's where it's setting it back into Firepad, or back into Firebase. All right, so that's kind of cool. So let's actually go ahead and create another new node to see if that one shows up as well. Give this one a title and call it, you know, whatever. Hi. And if we're lucky, this one will show up over here too. Yeah, so okay, now it's actually showing up. So you can see we've made these changes right here. Yes. Yeah, so this history piece right here, yes, that's exactly right. The history is only on the Firepad editor. So if you wanted to do your own tracking of this, and if you wanted to keep a history of the title, you could do something as well. For the sake of this example, the title was just kind of like, I don't really care. It's the text inside here that you would collaborate on. The title could change, and you really don't need to know about whether or not it's changed in the past. But this is where you want to be able to keep track of through changes with other people. Yeah, that history does, the formatting. So if I do this stuff here, it should, I think, give us some indication of what changed. So all of these obviously are relating to something within Firepad, telling it, you know, these are the types of things that changed. Maybe this is like operation, and these are the types of things that it did. You know, highlighted these characters or something like that, or whatever.
So that's Firepad specific. They abstract that. Or is that?
I'm not 100% sure. I didn't look too closely at it, but I don't think that it's exposed. Although you could probably pull it out pretty easily if you really wanted to take the time to do it. So let's take a look back over here real quick. So that was kind of interesting. And then the other thing we want to look at is a list of notes. It's kind of important to look at as well. So this is pretty simple, and basically we've just got a repeater here, and we're going to pull down the array with that Firebase array call in our service over here, get notes. So we're returning an array with the reference of whatever reference is passed into it. In this case, our reference is just everything that's under notes. So we're getting all the children. And like I said, there are methods here that you can do, like .filter or .apply or whatever. It's pretty well documented on like what you can actually do to, like, say I want just the last 10 of these things. I want you to order these in a particular way, or just restrict it to just my notes or something like that. So for something like this, We don't have it built into this example, but ideally you would save a list of user IDs with the notes so that you know who has the authorization to do anything with those notes, so that if you're not on that list, you shouldn't see the note, you shouldn't be able to edit the note or anything like that, and it shouldn't show up in your list. And if you were able, if you could, you would add that in here and then just filter down on that. So if we go back over to the note list real quick here, our controller is actually a lot simpler than the note controller. So you can see we've got notes, got our auth object here, auth data. If we're logged in, then just give me the notes. Very simple. It's just like, just give me a list of the notes that's shown. So let's go over and take a look at the notes. So we've got 2 notes right here. And let's take a look here. So we've got a nice list here that shows both of these notes. And you've got this little view that you can see all of your notes and stuff like that. But let me just see if this actually works. I want to go in here and change this note. And you can see that this is editing. I'm editing in this browser window over here. This has got the binding going on back to Firebase so that I can make changes live to this note. And it's showing up in my list of notes. So if I really wanted to just kind of, I could just sit here and watch this list of notes as people are working on it. Now, if we had another browser open to this note with a different user, excuse me, I didn't put some of this stuff in here. Let's just see if we can try another browser. Okay, and let's try. Register, and okay, so foobar now has their own account, but we want foobar to edit this node over here, right? So let's go over here. And it may not give us the So that's not showing up, but there is a little piece built into FirePad, and it may just be this current version. I don't have it set up yet. That will actually give you a colored cursor in your note that will correlate to a color that it automatically assigns to the user. So that when you're in there editing, you'll have multiple colored cursors based on who's doing what. And actually, it may be showing it. Okay, so if you look very carefully here, so you can see I've just highlighted in this browser here as one user, and it's showing up over here in the other one as a yellow highlight. So let's just see what happens if I highlight in this one and switch back over to here. So the color pink is assigned to this user, and the color yellow is assigned to this user. You could go a step farther than that if you wanted to, and you could absolutely position the bubble above there with the person's name if you wanted to save that, if you wanted to do that. So you could have this live edit, kind of like.
Can you show us right now, type 2 hands in both windows?
If I could have focus on both windows at once, I would.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. If anybody wants to try hitting my IP directly, I don't know if you can do it from the guest network or not. If you're on the same domain, just give it a shot.
That cursor information.
Yes. Actually, let me show you that real quick because that's a good thing to look at. No, I'm not, so I don't know if it's going to work. I'm on the Access 3 network. It's probably a different VLAN or something, so if you're not on the same subnet, then you're probably not going to be able to do it. But let me go over to this here. So if we look at this particular note, it's got the user saved against it. So whoever simple login 7 is assigned this color right here. And hey, we've got actual users showing up over here finally. So there's our foobar user. They're showing up. So we take a look here. Again, these are just ones that the Firebase or Firepad is just picking at random. So you have some visual indication of like who actually is editing that note. What's under the, where's that? Oh, cursor. So it looks like it's showing you what that person currently has actually selected on the page. So from there, that's all I have in my example. But like I said before, the next step after authentication will be authorization, so that you could manage what users have access to what nodes. And then you could do something like a user service so that you could bring in more data about the different users that are using it. And then you could do things like do a little bubble thing on top to show you who's actually editing it. You could also do a user service to do things like show your picture up here or whatever, your avatar, your personal information on here. You could put some meta information inside these notes. So you could show here who you've got the notes shared with, for example, if you had a user service. And you could give yourself the option to go out, look at a list of people, pick who you want to add to that note, and then you would have, you know, a way to get those rules applied so that those users have that. And you can just go from there. So I tell you, nobody has access to it. Yeah. It's just JSON. Yeah, if you want to put relations in, you can, but it's all going to be. Actually, the Firebase convention is to kind of flatten things, and it's actually, let me see if I can find it here. If anybody knows what it is off the top of their heads, feel free to blurt it out.
No, it's like the whole Mongo thing. You need to decide, do you want to embed objects or do you want to create the references with IDs? So you have your array of users, and then you have a node that has the ID of the user. You still have to go look up the user and the user's array to grab all of the information. It's really, it's the thing I'm always struggling with Mongo is like, what do you embed versus link to? Well, they do have some, they've got blog posts on what they do, the way they recommend. I don't know, but I can find it again and post it in the comments. So, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they show you what not to do versus.
Right. So this would kind of go towards the recommended pattern. It's just kind of geared towards your relational stuff, but what does it say here? Yeah.
Right.
Are there any other major differences in parts?
Do you know, Nick?
I thought Firebase was but I didn't think too much different parts. I used parts for a while and got frustrated with Firebase, and Firebase is.
Yeah.
I can speak on the pricing differences, but I found Firebase like prototypes and just the docs are great. Just does everything.
Yeah, and yeah, I agree. The documentation on it is just so easy to use. The guides are super helpful. It's like way better than a lot of the stuff that's out there. It's just really ridiculously easy to like get your head around and do something productive with really quickly. And I'm just trying to see if I can find, I think it was in the guide somewhere where it talks about like how to structure your data when you're saving it, but I don't remember exactly. Hey, right there, structuring data. See, it's really so obvious I missed it. So I'm too worried about React not being a framework. Okay, so avoid building nests. So don't nest your data any farther than 32 levels deep. Something to think about, this should be the default structure. But when we fetch data at a location in our database, we also retrieve all the child nodes. Therefore, in practice, it's best to keep it as flat as possible, just as one would structure SQL tables. So look at this nested structure here, it says, for example. So you've got this stuff nested inside here. With this nested design, iterating becomes problematic. Even simple operations like listing the names of the rooms require the entire rooms tree. Not a good idea, right? So flatten your data out. So that's pretty much what you would do with your relational stuff too, right? Flatten it as much as possible. So here's a flattened architecture right here for the example. So you've got rooms. Yeah. Yes, exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, because again, your authorization is built against your tree. So you can go down as many levels as you want, and you can set up an authorization down here at this child. So if you have like a data structure that's like, you know, a list of things and then an object within there or whatever, you can do that.
So I found a blog post on how to go about structuring your data, and it clearly says it's at the top, this is outdated. Let's go to what he's showing.
Yeah. Yeah. So like I said, the docs are great. If you're interested in Firebase, definitely take a look at it. The guide is really good to look at. It's really pretty easy to get started with this. Like I said, I haven't messed around too much with the authorization piece, but the authentication is pretty simple and straightforward. I think that comes down here somewhere. Providers, auth state. Yeah, I don't know. If I find it, we can look at it, but that was essentially what I had. So, anybody have any more questions? Comments?
It seems like this Firebase is currency. It's like you would don't use it for your own.
So I think that's probably the big draw for it. I mean, it is a backend as a service. So if you want a backend, there's obviously a number of them to pick from. And I think there was, an Apache user grids presentation recently, and they also are backend as a service too, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And Parse is another one.
Parse, okay. So yeah.
I wonder if anybody has any experience using Firebase with lots of data, because it seems to get pretty expensive pretty quick. And,
Right.
I think so. From what I understand, they're looking at you're talking big data. Yeah. Since Google bought Firebase, I think they're kind of probably starting with that more towards unit and cloud platform. My understanding is they're also working on like a Firebase like large data store. That's probably not here. Is their pricing based on connection, but storage, but not.
Just take a look. Yeah, there's 3 plans. There's the free plan, which is, I think it's number of connections, data transfer, storage, and then you can also get hosting, storage, and hosting transfer as well. So in addition to being a backend, you can also host your front-end files from there as well. So that's something you need. Maybe you want to drop like your current hosting and just use this.
Makes sense. Yeah. Plans I was thinking about. You have to use someone else in your front-end hosting.
Right.
Now you have a front-end server and
Yeah, good point. Hey.
Or, so you mentioned large. And if you have something like Firecast, you're in the industry, like, how does it manage?
I don't know. It's a good question. Yeah, I mean, it's all JSON, so I guess it would just send it over in a big whatever. But probably a good one to look into and find out, especially if you need to work with big data, I guess.
Yeah, I guess my question is, if you do know you have but you don't really care about how updates going on.
Right.
I don't think their API has that chunking ability. So I think you would just be relying on them to chunk it for you.
with a backend, that's involved. Like they have Java and go with the server side and maps. You could do the company.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point because everything's just a REST call. So you could have your server consuming the data.
You just lose the real
Right.
part of it. Well, actually, you wouldn't have to. As long as you have, like, as long as you're aware of the tree, atomic updates. Yeah. You were testing out the Citrix product.
So we haven't launched this product at all yet, and I don't know if that is going to happen as a product, but it was basically just a concept to like say, hey, how can we do collaborative editing and stuff like that? And there was also another team, company that did a very similar project with Firebase, but they approached it a little bit differently, so it wasn't necessarily the same thing. So, anything else? Yeah. It's already up there. So if you want to get it from GitHub, it is on my GitHub account right here, github.com/unbunk, fire notes. So that whole thing is on there. All the different stop points that I tagged them all, so each one of those should be a little bit descriptive. You can start the server there and just kind of see what's going on and see what works or doesn't. I could, but it's really easy to just create a config folder and put one in there. Or you can just hard code the. So basically, the value that you're using for your config in your config folder is, I can find it right here, a config object with a Firebase property, and basically it's just the database that you're using. So whatever database you get from Firebase, that's just the one you want to drop in there. Or you can just go directly into anything that needs to make a call to the database, and you can just hard code it in any place that it needs the URL, like right here. But I think it's a little bit easier to manage just by putting it in a config file or putting it externally. And again, if you're doing like a build or something like that, you're not going to keep that database right in there. That's going to be part of your build process. You're going to write that in, or it's going to be a config file that's going to get written somewhere. So. I don't know that you do. You just point it to your database. There's actually some whitelistings for the domains, I think,
yeah,
right?
you can restrict what domains have access to it. I mean, reading that understanding security section is very important.
Yeah. Yes.
Like it's unfortunate that it's number 6, where I feel like it should be like number 2.
Yeah.
You gotta have data to secure.
Yeah, and here's the section about the authorization stuff too, and rules. It tells you, who you can allow people to read or write or not, and then it gets them. Yeah. There is another section in here somewhere.
Go to your plan or your dashboard. And then go to. We'll go back to that.
Oh, right. Yeah, I think it shows in here when you look at.
Security. I think you scroll down. Log in and on.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's automatically authorized against localhost 127, your loopback address, and your Firebase app. So if you were hosting this on Firebase, then obviously it would work. But you can pick your domain that you want to use. Oh, you're right. That is OAuth. There was something else on there too about.
Was it just the one?
For third-party auth, your domain must be whitelisted below for a while. Well, I don't know. That's just for custom auth. So what's on? Yeah, you wouldn't normally do that anyways. Yeah, and that's another thing you should probably read is the security and rules stuff so that you can lock down stuff to whichever people need to have access to it. It's pretty good, but again, wasn't covered in this one, so more stuff to get into. What else? All right. Hope it was informative. Thanks for coming out.
All right, I got a bunch of T-shirts too. So I'm not going to do the cool, awesome. What is it? What is it called? What do I call it? Raffle. All right, so I don't know how to do this. Let's go with the mediums first, and I think you'd probably be a medium. You want a T-shirt? You, yes, you there. Right here. Oh, they're lack sheets. Still, it's a cool T-shirt. Oh, look at that. Open at Citrix. So, all right, I got another medium. Somebody want medium? No, seriously, who wants a medium? You know what? I could just set these out up here if you want. Yeah. All right, and then August, what was it, 19th, I think? Internet of Things with First Otter. That should be pretty cool. So, thanks for coming. Take some pizza. Take some Firebase swag. Take the hot sauce.